Hey guys, welcome back to my series on restoring classic late 40s American black and white electrostatic televisions. In this series I'm going to be pointing out some of the differences between these sets and the more common magnetically deflected sets, give you some tips, some tricks, some suggestions, some pitfalls to avoid to get these up and running. Now, where did I get this set? Well, as I talked about in the other series on magnetic sets, a customer dropped off this set, but in general, where do I find my sets? Early Television Convention in Hilliard, Ohio is where you're going to see the biggest variety and best prices. If you can't make it there, of course, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and join the collectors groups on Facebook, or Antique Radio Forum, or Video Karma. Ask around. You may actually find one at a flea market or a garage sale. People find them in the basements or closets all the time. Now, to get this out, or in general, just like with a radio, pull all the knobs. In this case, I think we're missing one. It was a little bit different than I've seen on the earlier Admiral sets, but we've got the usual Admiral channel knob with the long tail. Fine tuning knobs on these are especially hard to come by because these are exactly the same as the much more common magnetically deflected sets, so I shouldn't say much more common, but anyways, they're interchangeable, but the fine tuning knobs are longer. These are a bit hard to find, and these outer knobs seem to be a variation that's particular to this, although I think some radios might use these. And I believe when this arrived it was missing one. IX, this is a replacement control. Should have knurled knobs on both sides. This is a half moon. That's got to be a replacement control. So this knob won't even fit on there. So see what I can do about that. There are 4 bolts from below. I recommend you hang this over the workbench until you can find them. But before I take any out, I'll give you a peek underneath so you know what I'm talking about. Or unfortunately, the label's worn off this, but there would be a label there normally with info about the model and the tube chart. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Be careful. It's very often these get cracked or chipped out here because these are over tightened. 2 of the screws are already missing, so be careful before you start tipping this on its side or pointing it so the back is down, because the chassis may just fall out on you. Pretty sure it's 5/16 of an inch, so I just need a nut driver or ratchet. This will do the trick. Yep, looks like a charm. There we go. So it's holding these together. It's 4 of these, or in this case 2. Whenever you see that there's some missing or they don't all match, guaranteed it's been worked on. But often these haven't, because again, low cost, use them for a couple years, throw it in the closet. You don't pay to get these fixed because it's not worth your money. Just get a new set, bigger screen. Which is good for us. That's why there's so many of these still around. That should be it. So memory serves, these are self-contained. Speaker. Oh no, speaker goes to the cabinet. So you do have to reach in. Same with the Motorola sets and pretty much most magnetic sets, but not all. Some of them the speaker is mounted to the chassis, but in this one we do have to reach in there carefully, and it unplugs from the chassis right in front of the power transformer down in here. There we go. Speaker plug. Now we should be good to go to pull it out. Carefully slide it back. Oh yeah. This is very crusty looking and very much original looking, even though I suspect it has had some work done to it, like that replacement control. Well, you'll see more in a moment. Here's what we're left with. Got a little 4-inch round speaker. Screen. Now, we'll warn you about these and some of these other sets. So Bakelite, how's the speaker mounted to it? There are 4 posts molded into the Bakelite itself, and they use speed nuts, these spring steel that's curved and they push them onto those posts. Pain in the butt to get off, and it's easy to snap off those posts. So do not remove it if you don't have to. Same with the screen. Try to clean it as best you can on the inside without having to unmount it. Another common problem is these. The back is missing from this one. We could make one from masonite. It's not too difficult. I have before. And they mount into these, which again are molded. This is just all one piece from an injection molding machine. And they tap the inside of these, so they're threaded so they can accept a screw, and the screws go in here. These are very often bust out. But it looks like all of these are intact. Of course, we're missing the back, which is kind of annoying, but not at all uncommon. We're going to put that away safely in another room. We don't want it to get damaged. That's one of the rarer variations with that unique grill pattern. Alright, it's up on the bench. So, Admiral 19A1, that's one of the most common 7-inch sets. This is very similar, but it's subtly different. I don't know that Admiral published service info for this exact chassis. There's no SAMs for it, but I did find a page in a Wallace Tele-Aid that it just has a schematic with some slight variations to it. But generally you can use the 19A1 info. Now, one thing I see right away that's kind of cool and interesting is this. We got a little Coke bottle tube in here. So what's this about? So 6AS5 or 6Y6G, most of them use a 6AS5. It's an audio output tube. Which is odd because this is a newer chassis, but it's got the older tube type. So this is an old Coke bottle 6Y6G audio output tube. It's an RCA, so it's not the original. We got a Raytheon Uniline tube. More RCA, Sylvania. I think I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Admiral. Looks like all the IF tubes, or most of them. The miniatures in here are Admirals. They have an Admiral logo on them. But the power tubes, Admiral branded. Why do I care? Why am I interested? Well, the more original tubes it has is an indication of how many hours are on it. Something else interesting about these chassis, or these Admiral sets, is the pitch tube will have a red stamp on it. Matches this. They both seem to say R, which will be the chassis revision, but also means it's the original picture tube. So good or bad, don't know necessarily, but we'll find out once we get it working. These are the sweep tubes. Be some 6SN7s and a 6SL7 with some bright shiny dots on top, indication of high hour. It's filthy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when I'm pulling these tubes out, it's really shiny and very clean looking. So this may have that this is a 6SL7 replacement Raytheon Uniline. That may very well have sealed and preserved everything, and this could be gleaming cadmium plated steel underneath. CLR, we'll take a quick look at that. Obviously not needed to get it working, but yeah, who doesn't like a nice shiny chassis? Now here's the moment of truth. What are we in store for? Ooh, okay. Seen better, seen worse. Interesting. So when I'm mentioning about things being replaced, being original and whatnot, I'm saying that for a few reasons. One, if you have the luxury where you could pull out a chassis before you buy one, you can point these things out and maybe get a lower price. But it's not all original. That's a replacement control. How did I know? Because the shaft is different from this style. I've seen these before. It should be brass and straight for most of the travel, knurled at the end. This is knurled on the whole length, and it's half moon, blue plastic on the back. This is a universal replacement control. That is not the original cap. It's a nice, neat job. It's the original cap holder, but This is a twist lock type cap or a circuit board mount type cap, and the wires, this isn't original wiring. It's solid and the insulation isn't that thick. This is the original wiring. That is not. But again, neat job. It's an old repair. That's an old replacement. Maybe done in the 50s or 60s. The rest of it looks to be original. Well, maybe not. How do I know? Well, because I've seen a bunch of these. And these, well, I'll give you a tour of the chassis. How about that? Well, let's start down here. Power switch volume control, and right behind it is your audio. So that 6Y6 audio output tube is right here. And a preamp, I believe, is there. And then we have a power transformer and electrolytic caps down in here. So we got power supply, audio, and control. That's the tuner. Same type of tuner that was used in many, many, many sets. A big drum. Each one of these strips is a different channel. These are removable if you needed to for some reason. These little dots are contacts. You should clean them up. I believe they're silver plated, so that's tarnished silver we're looking at there. Moving up this way, we have our sweep circuits. Those were where those octal tube was. The 6SN7s, the 6SL7, that's your sweep circuitry, and your oscillator. Your oscillators and your output amps that drive that electron beam up, down, left, right. Up here and curving around, hugging the tuner up here, that's your IF. Sound and video IF. Up here, your high voltage stuff. So that's one of the big differences between this and a magnetically deflected set. We don't have a flyback. We don't have a yoke. What we do have are some big honking capacitors up here and some strange looking pots that are mounted on a phenolic board, and they have plastic shafts. These have thousands of volts on them. These caps and these controls have around 5,000 volts or so on them. All these needs to be insulated. These resistors up here are a special divider circuit that are tapped for different elements in the picture tube and different circuits. So there's all your high voltage stuff up here. They crammed in a little bit of power supply. I think that's the filter choke, and this one of these might be audio output transformer or a sweep transformer. He's a little fuzzy. Got a big old glob of wax here. It's oozed out of that guy. Yeah, that's the filter choke. So if you see things like a big blob of oozing wax and capacitor guts leaking out, could be a sign that somebody was running this with excessively leaky caps, and it was drawing excessive current, and it may have damaged some components. So something else to be wary of. Now, if this was 100% original, I'm pretty sure all these caps would have an Admiral logo on them, and they do not. Of the ones I can see, these two in particular say Chicago television capacitor. Saw that for the first time, I believe it was last year, restoring a Sentinel electrostatic set. They literally say television capacitor on them. That's probably all these were ever used in. They were made specifically for these electrostatic sets. But I don't know if they're original. I'm used to working on 19A1s. Maybe with the 17T1s they got a different source for these parts. I'm trying to tell from looking at the wiring. It looks like if these are replacements, they did a pretty nice job. We'll find out more when we dig into it. I suspect they're replacements because that's a high failure rate part. They're also expensive. Now, most of these, again, to keep cost down, most of these electrostatic TVs are series strong in either a hot or floating chassis. I mean, there's no power transformer. You really need an isolation transformer to work on them safely. An exception is these Admirals. They do have a power transformer. They're one of the better performing and better made electrostatic sets. But even so, there's some stuff that's cut some corners. The gauge of the steel on this chassis is about half what you'd see on a magnetic set from the same manufacturer. So it's got some flex to it. And it's got big cutouts on the front for the pitch tube and these controls, so be a little careful with that, that you don't put pressure on something you don't want to when you're working on it. The wiring quality, the point-to-point, the way the components are, it's not quite the same build quality you might see on its bigger brother. Absolute minimum parts. Notice there aren't that many capacitors. If we ignore these big electrolytic paper caps up here, how many paper caps are we left with? And we have one down there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think there's about 18 paper caps in it. Not all that many compared to some more elaborate sets. I think it has 3 IF stages. And most of the caps, we've got ceramic disc, some tubular ceramic, and just in general, the parts count is pretty low. It works well. It's one of the better made ones, as I said, so you can imagine that there's considerably cheaper construction quality sets out there. So this is one of the better ones. But so I mentioned earlier about these are easy to work on. Well, see, it's pretty wide open. You can get at these caps pretty easily. And that's the main thing you're going to want to do, just like with any other radio or TV. All these paper caps are going to be bad. These especially. And they typically failed back then. So it's very common to see these have already been replaced, but these replacements are going to be bad too. So those are going to go. Now what do you replace them with? You see, now we're getting into the oddities of working on these sets. They're cheap sets, cheaply made, but they can get kind of expensive to restore. So we have 5 caps in here. They're specialty caps these days. I only know of a few ways to replace them. The best, if you want to get as close to the original as possible, is you want to get these guys. High voltage axial plastic film capacitors. The only place I know of, the only game in town these days is Just Radios. And they carry these. You get .001s typically for the 2 smaller horizontal coupling caps. On the other 3, one is the filter on the high voltage supply, the other 2 are the vertical coupling caps. Those are going to be .005s or .0047s. You can get both of them from Just Radios. They're $7 or $8 each. So you're looking at about $40 in caps. Plus shipping, say $50. So $50 just to replace those caps. Or you can get these guys, which are Vima. This is the only other plastic film option I know of. But these are circuit board mount. These are like $1.50 each. You get these from Mauser or DigiKey. You're going to have to take these little dinky leads, bend them a little bit, put extension leads on them. And remember, you're going to have 5,000-6,000 volts or thereabouts on here. So no sharp points. Then you get current discharge. You're going to want to make good joints, and you may want to dab a little bit of red insulating varnish, Corona dope, liquid electrical tape if you have to insulate those solder joints. And you might be thinking, well, what about ceramic disc caps? Sure, they exist. Here's one. I pulled out of one of these sets. It's a .0047 6,000 volt cap. Hey, that's exactly what that is. Why can't we just use this? Because of what it was made out of. The Z5U printed up there. That's the type of ceramic used in these. It's terrible for 2 reasons. One, its characteristics changes with temperature badly, meaning the capacitance changes as temperature changes, which will distort your waveform. You really want to have as clean and linear a sawtooth in these as possible. The other issue, much bigger issue, is dielectric constant changes with applied voltage. By the time you're up to 6,000 volts, the capacitance has changed considerably. So instead of a nice sharp sawtooth, it's going to be bent at the top. It will be very noticeable on your resulting image as bad linearity. More on the vertical than the horizontal, because it's lower frequency, it's more sensitive to changes in capacitance. You can use ceramic if you use a much higher value. So instead of, say, of 0.0047, use 0.047. However, they're going to be huge, and they're not going to be cheap. So you might as well just go with the plastic film in the first place. And you're thinking, oh, I'll get better quality ceramic like C0G or NP0 ceramic. If they exist, if you can find them, they're going to be huge and expensive like they'll be for transmitters. They'll probably be like this big and be $100 each or something like that. So really, you're going to use these or you're going to use these, and that's that. Last thing I want to talk about in this segment are these guys, these resistors. These are bleeder voltage divider resistors that go between the output of the high voltage rectifier and ground, and they're tapped at different points to feed various circuits. Now notice these are 1 watt, and often they're 2 watt resistors, and that's not because they get hot or dissipate a lot of power. It's because resistors have a voltage rating. A 1/2 watt resistor is good for 350 volts, a 1 watt resistor 500, and a 2 watt 750. Now what does that mean? Well, you can't put 750 volts across a 1 ohm resistor or it'll explode. Now what it means is for these high value resistors, 1 meg, 2 meg, 2.2, 2.7, if it's a 1/2 watt resistor and you put 500 volts across it, the material it's made out of can start breaking down could start deteriorating. Eventually it'll just arc from one end of the resistor to the other. They kind of push the limits on these sometimes, I think. So these are 1 watt resistors. And if you do the math, and this is 2.2, 2.2, 1 meg, I've done the math, and I've found that they exceed the ratings on these sometimes. So these should not have more than 500 volts across them. We've got around 6 or 7 between 6,000 volts as ground. And if you just do the math, that means we're going to have more than 500 volts across some of these. And I've seen these do squirrely things where you can measure them with an ohm meter and it'll measure okay, but when you power the setup, things aren't quite right. I think that's because there's carbon tracks that are burned into this internally, and when there's power applied to it, it's tunneling through them sort of, and it's messing up the voltage divider. So I highly recommend you just go ahead and replace those with resistors like these. These are Vishay VR37s. These are good for 3.5 kilovolts, 3,500 volts across these before they might start breaking down. They're like 30-40 cents each. You might need 6 or 7 of them, so I would just go ahead and replace those with these, is my suggestion. So that's it for the chassis tour. Next time we're going to talk about where would you get started with this? How is this any different from any other project? And I'll tell you, in general, it's similar, but there are a few things you should watch out for, and there's some parts you should replace before you think about powering it up. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.